The story of the Cowboys gang begins in the dry heat of the Arizona desert, in a place where laws were weak, danger was everywhere, and men lived by the gun. In those days, people spoke about one group of riders in low voices. They called them the Cowboys. Some folks said the Cowboys were just cattle thieves. Others claimed they were killers who rode like ghosts. But everyone agreed on one thing when the Cowboys arrived. Trouble followed. These men wore red sashes around their waists. To most people, that bright cloth looked like a warning sign. It told the town that these riders were not afraid of anything. They did not fear the law. They did not fear death. They only feared losing their power. The red sash became their symbol. It showed who they were and what they were willing to do. At first glance, the Cowboys did not look like a dangerous army. They were a mix of young riders, troublemakers, ranch hands, and drifters. Some were experienced gunmen. Others were simply men who had lost their homes or families and had nowhere else to go. But when they gathered together, they became something more, a wild force that could shake the entire region. The townspeople of Arizona tried to ignore them at first. They hoped the Cowboys would pass through quickly, like dust carried by the PA wind. But weeks turned into months, and months into years. The Cowboys stayed. Their numbers grew. Their courage grew too. Soon, they began to control long stretches of land near the border. They rode into towns, laughing loudly, drinking heavily, and firing their guns into the air just to show who ruled the night. People learned to stay quiet. They lowered their eyes when a cowboy passed by. They moved out of the way and prayed not to be noticed. Because when the Cowboys noticed someone, that person often regretted it. The Cowboys did not work like a regular gang. They had no official leader, no written rules, no fixed plans. But everyone understood that Curly Bill Brocious was one of the strongest among them. Curly Bill seemed always half drunk, always smiling, and always ready to pull the trigger. His laughter could fill a room one moment and disappear like smoke the next. Many men feared him, many men followed him, and he enjoyed every bit of that power. Another face often seen with the Cowboys was Ike Clanton. Ike was loud, restless, and constantly angry at something or someone. He talked big and made threats even bigger. He wanted people to fear his name, but when trouble came too close, Ike often stepped back. Still, Ike's voice carried far, and sometimes noise is enough to start a war. Together, men like Curly Bill and Ike helped shape the Cowboys into a growing force, a force that moved freely between Arizona and Mexico, stealing cattle, smuggling whiskey, and creating fear wherever they rode. By the late 1870s, the Cowboys were known everywhere. Every rancher, farmer, and traveler knew the stories. Some had seen the Cowboys ride by at night, their red sashes glowing in the moonlight like streaks of fire. Others had witnessed their temper when a deal went wrong or when someone made a mistake around them. The Cowboys were unpredictable. That made them even more dangerous. Yet beneath their rough appearance, there was something deeply human about them. Many Cowboys had started on honest paths. Some were once good ranch workers, soldiers, or family men. But life on the frontier was hard, work was scarce, food was not guaranteed, the border offered quick money if a man was willing to take risks, and in the desert, risk was a daily companion. So some men crossed the line, some crossed many lines, and together they became a gang that did not think about tomorrow, only today, only survival, only the next ride. Still, none of them knew that their world would soon collide with a family of Earps. When the Earps arrived, trouble seemed to rise like a storm cloud in the distance. The Cowboys did not fear storms, but this one would grow into something larger than any of them expected. For now, the Cowboys were still in control. They rode with pride across the desert, their horses kicking up dust as they moved in groups, sometimes 8 or 10, sometimes more. When they rode into Tombstone, people felt their presence before they even entered the streets. Boots clapping on wooden floors stopped. Voices dropped. Doors closed. Mothers held their children close. And the cowboys enjoyed it. They enjoyed the silence, the respect, the fear, because fear is a kind of power. And power is what the cowboys wanted most. But no gang can rule forever. And soon, the cowboys would meet the men who would challenge everything they stood for. Men who did not bow. Men who did not run. Men who were willing to fight back. This was the beginning of a clash that would become legend. A battle written in dust, smoke, and blood. The Cowboys gang did not appear overnight. Their story began long before their red sashes became symbols of fear. To understand them, a person must look back at the lives they lived before they rode together. Because every outlaw starts as something else sometimes, a farmer, sometimes a soldier, sometimes just a man trying to survive a hard world. In the years after the Civil War, America was changing fast. Towns were rising in the West. Railroads were cutting through open land. New laws were forming, but many areas still had no real order. Across Arizona and the borderland, life was rough. Food was scarce. Work was uncertain. A man could travel all day and still have nothing to show for it. Many men arrived in the West hoping for a new start. They dreamed of land, cattle, or gold. But not everyone was lucky. Some found themselves broke. Some found themselves hungry. And some found themselves desperate. Out of this desperation, the earliest cowboys were born. At first they were not. Called the Cowboys Gang. They were simply a loose group of riders who crossed the border into Mexico to steal cattle. In those early days, it was small 2 or 3 men sneaking into the night, driving stolen animals north and selling them for quick money. It was dangerous work, but it paid more than anything else around. Slowly, more men joined in. Some were thrill seekers who enjoyed the danger. Others were outcasts with no place to go. A few were honest ranch workers who were tired of earning pennies while watching rich men get richer. And then there were those who simply enjoyed breaking rules. When these types of men come together, trouble always follows. The cowboys became known for their speed and skill. They rode fast, worked quickly, and knew those desert trails better than most lawmen. They understood how to vanish into the hills, how to hide tracks, and how to move stolen cattle without being caught. Soon, their activities grew from simple rustling to larger crimes ambushing travelers, smuggling whiskey, and attacking Mexican ranches. But even as they grew darker and more violent, the cowboys still lived by one rule: loyalty to each other came first. It was this loyalty that attracted men like Curly Bill Brocious. Curly Bill was already known in mining camps and saloons as a wild and unpredictable man. He had a quick temper, a quicker laugh, and a dangerous love for strong drink. When he joined the Cowboys, he naturally rose to the top, not because he gave orders like a leader, but because men followed him without being asked. His confidence, his skill with a gun, and his fearless nature made him a symbol of the gang's spirit. Another well-known figure was Ike Clanton. Ike came from a ranching family, but he never quite fit into the life of a quiet cowboy. He talked too much, got angry too quickly, and made more enemies than friends. But Ike carried one thing: the cowboys valued hatred for authority. He believed lawmen were out to ruin his family. That belief fueled his anger and pushed him deeper into the gang's world. Together, men like Curly Bill and Ike helped turn the Cowboys from a group of rustlers into a dangerous force. With no central leader and no strict rules, the gang grew naturally, like a wildfire spreading across dry grass. Some members were serious criminals. Others were simply trying to survive. But all of them wore the red sash that marked them as cowboys. The border region became their playground. Local sheriffs feared them, Mexican ranchers hated them, and travelers prayed not to cross paths with them. Stories spread from camp to camp, stories of gunfights, robberies, and nights when the Cowboys took over entire towns. Some tales were true, others were exaggerated, but each one added to their growing legend. Still, the Cowboys were not just villains. Many of them carried pain from their pasts. Some had lost families. Some had survived bloody battles in the war. Others had watched the world change faster than they could keep up. Their choices were shaped by hardship, and hardship, when mixed with freedom and anger, can turn a man into something dangerous. By late 1879, the Cowboys had become one of the most feared groups in Arizona. Yet, they did not see themselves as criminals. They saw themselves as survivors men who did what they had to do. They believed the West belonged to them, not to sheriffs or judges or fancy businessmen. They believed in their own kind of justice, their own rules, their own way of life, but their world was about to change, because around this same time, a new family arrived in the growing town of Tombstone. The Earps. They were different from the Cowboys. They believed in law, order, and building a safe future. They believed the frontier needed rules, not chaos. And because they believed these things strongly, they would soon clash with the Cowboys in ways neither side could imagine. For now, the Cowboys still rode free. Their red sashes waved proudly in the desert wind. Their horses thundered across the land, and their shadows stretched long across a frontier that feared them. But destiny was moving closer, step by step, toward a meeting that would change the West forever. By the early 1880s, the Cowboys were no longer just a bunch of riders looking for quick money. They had grown into something much bigger, a borderland empire, stretching across dusty trails, hidden valleys, and dangerous crossings between Arizona and Mexico. Their power came not from the law, but from fear, loyalty, and the wide open land that let them move like shadows. The Mexican border was the perfect place for men like them. It was far from strong government control, filled with long empty roads, where no sheriff or soldier patrolled. Ranches were scattered miles apart, making it easy for cattle thieves to slip across unnoticed. And when the Cowboys rode in groups of 10 or more, armed with rifles and revolvers, few dared to stand against them. What started as small rustling trips soon became organized raids. The Cowboys would cross the border at night, steal dozens sometimes, hundreds of Mexican cattle, and drive them back into Arizona before sunrise. Once the animals crossed the line, the gang sold them openly, claiming they were legally purchased or raised on ranches owned by friendly families. Local authorities knew what was happening. Mexican ranchers sent angry letters, but nothing changed. Many sheriffs avoided conflict with the Cowboys. Others accepted bribes. And some simply feared the consequences of angering a gang that controlled miles of territory. Two towns became central to the Cowboys' growing empire: Charleston and Galeyville. These places were small, rough, and filled with miners, gamblers, and men who enjoyed quick money. In these dusty streets, the Cowboys felt at home. They rode in and out freely, drank heavily in the saloons, and often settled arguments with their pistols, people there. Knew one simple rule: do not cross the Cowboys. The men wore their red sashes proudly. It was not just a symbol. Now it was a warning. When people saw that bright band of cloth, they stepped aside. Some shopkeepers even closed early if they heard Cowboys were coming. No one wanted to be the one who accidentally said the wrong thing. Inside the gang, certain figures began to stand out. Curly Bill Brocious became almost legendary. He laughed loudly, drank more than anyone, and often shot his guns into the sky, just for fun. But behind the jokes and wild behavior was a deadly man. His aim was sharp, and his temper was quick. When he felt disrespected, he did not hesitate. Many stories about Curly Bill ended the same way: someone lying still on the ground. Not far behind him was Johnny Ringo, a quieter, more mysterious member of the Cowboys. Ringo was different. Where others acted with loud anger, Ringo acted with cold precision. He rarely smiled, rarely joked, and rarely lost his temper. But people whispered that he was one of the fastest guns in Arizona. Some said he could draw and fire before another man even touched his holster. Whether true or not, Ringo's reputation added a dark edge to the Cowboys' power. And then there was Ike Clanton, a talker, a bragger, and a man who loved making threats. But Ike understood the social side of the gang. He knew how to bring men together, how to stir anger, and how to use fear like a tool. His loud voice kept the Cowboys united, especially when they needed to act quickly. Together, these men and dozens of others formed a group that was part family, part criminal, network, and part unstoppable force. Their empire grew with every successful raid, every stolen herd, and every frightened town that let them pass. But with power came consequences. One of the biggest problems was that the Cowboys' raids into Mexico often turned violent. They sometimes clashed with Mexican soldiers, ranchers fought back, innocent people were caught in the middle. The Mexican government grew furious. They demanded action. They wanted justice. But justice was not easy in the Wild West. American officials in Arizona were slow to react because the Cowboys brought money into the region. Their stolen cattle fed local markets. Their presence kept certain towns alive. And, most importantly, confronting them meant risking war with a gang that did not fear death. Still, not everyone ignored the problem. Some lawmen and ranch owners spoke openly about stopping the Cowboys. Among these voices were the Earp brothers, who were beginning to make a name for themselves in Tombstone. Tombstone was a mining town rising fast. Silver was discovered there, and people rushed in from all directions. The Earps came hoping for opportunity, not conflict. They planned to open businesses, build reputations, and bring order to the growing settlement. But the moment the Earps arrived, they entered a land already shaped by the Cowboys' influence. Everywhere they looked, they saw signs of the gang's control stolen cattle, armed riders, nervous townspeople, and the red sashes that marked outlaw authority. The Earps believed the West needed law. The Cowboys believed the West belonged to them. Two visions, two forces, one borderland. The Cowboys continued to grow stronger. They rode confidently, knowing the land was theirs. But in the distance, something was shifting. The arrival of the Earps marked the beginning of a slow, steady pressure. A pressure that would soon turn into conflict. For now, the Cowboys ruled the borderland, but their empire had reached its peak, and every empire, no matter how wild, must one day face a challenge. The storm was coming, and Tombstone would be the place where it finally hit, when the Cowboys were at the height of their power, riding freely across the border and ruling the desert with loud laughter and fast guns. A new family quietly arrived in the growing town of Tombstone. They did not come to start trouble. They did not come to make enemies. But fate had other plans. Their name was Earp. The Earps were very different from the Cowboys. They believed in rules, structure, and building a better future. Where the Cowboys rode with wild hearts, the Earps walked with steady steps. They were not perfect men, but they cared deeply about order in a world that often seemed to reject it. Wyatt Earp, the most famous of the brothers, was not sheriff when he first came to Tombstone. He had been a lawman before in other towns, but now he wanted a fresh start. Wyatt hoped to build a business, earn money, and leave behind the battles of his past. He was tall, calm, and controlled. His voice rarely rose, but when he looked a man in the eyes, that man usually understood Wyatt would not be pushed around. Beside him was Virgil Earp, the oldest brother. Virgil had a natural sense of duty. He had worn badges in many places, and believed strongly in keeping peace, even when peace seemed impossible. Virgil was respected, steady, and thoughtful. If Wyatt was the mind of the family, Virgil was the backbone. Then came Morgan Earp Younger, and full of quiet strength. Morgan was loyal, kind-hearted, and someone who believed in doing what was right even when it was dangerous. He supported his brothers in everything and trusted them completely. And of course, there was Doc Holliday. Doc was not an Earp by blood, but he was closer than many real brothers. He was a gambler, a gunslinger, and a man fighting a deadly disease that slowly weakened him. His cough was harsh, but his skill with a revolver was unmatched. Doc lived with pain every day, yet he stood beside the Earps as fiercely as any man could. These four Virgil, Morgan, and Doc did not come to Tombstone looking for war. They came chasing work, hope, and a chance to build something stable. The town itself was booming, filled with miners searching for silver. Saloons, shops, and hotels were growing fast. Money flowed through Tombstone like water through a cracked pipe. Opportunity was everywhere, but wherever opportunity appears, trouble usually follows. And in Tombstone, that trouble already had a name. The Cowboys. At first, the Earps and the Cowboys ignored each other. Tombstone was wide enough for both. The ARPs tried to focus on their businesses. They worked as deputies, guards, and sometimes gamblers. They tried to keep peace in the busy streets. But the Cowboys viewed lawmen with suspicion and anger. They believed the land belonged to them, not to judges and not to officers with shiny badges. The tension between the two groups grew. Quietly, like heat rising before a storm, small things started to divide. A stolen horse, a drunken fight, a few rough words. Most people in Tombstone could feel the pressure in the air, but no one wanted to be caught in the middle. It was Curly Bill Brocious, with his loud laugh and unpredictable temper, who made the first major crack. One night, during a drunken celebration, he fired his guns into the air, waking half the town. When Marshal Fred White, a respected lawman, stepped forward to take Curly Bill's weapon, the situation turned deadly. A shot rang out, and the marshal fell. Some said it was an accident. Others said it was murder. Either way, the town shook with fear. Wyatt Earp, who had rushed to help, arrested Curly Bill. The Cowboys were furious. They saw this act as a challenge and insult. To them, Curly Bill was not just a member, he was a symbol. And the ARPs had dared to touch him. From that moment on, things shifted. The line between the two groups was drawn clearer. Every cowboy looked at the IRPs with sharper eyes. Every IRP watched the Cowboys more carefully than before. Meanwhile, Ike Clanton, with his loud voice and quick temper, began to speak openly against the IRPs. He ranted in saloons, muttered threats in the streets, and swore that the Cowboys would never be controlled by a group of lawmen from out of Townie's anger fed the fire that already burned under the surface. The ARPs, however, tried to keep peace. They believed Tombstone could become a civilized place, clean, safe, and prosperous. But they also knew that peace cannot exist where law is ignored. And the Cowboys ignored law every chance they got. Still, the ARPs held back. They hoped things could calm down. They hoped the Cowboys would avoid direct conflict. They hoped the town would find balance. But history does not bend for hope. It bends for events. And a series of events was coming that would push both sides towards something deadly. For now, the Earps were still newcomers, trying to find their place. For now, the Cowboys were still laughing loudly and riding proudly. But the distance between them grew smaller each day. Two sides, who believes, one town that was not big enough for both. The meeting point of their fates was getting closer. And soon the streets of Tombstone would echo with gunfire. Tombstone grew louder and busier with every passing month. Miners rushed into town with silver dust on their clothes. Saloons filled with laughter, music, and drunken arguments. Gambling tables stayed crowded late into the night. But beneath the noise, a heavy silence lived in the hearts of the townspeople. They felt something coming, something dark, something dangerous. The Cowboys and the Earps were not yet at war, but every day pushed them closer. The tension started with small sparks. A stolen horse here, a heated argument there, a cowboy insulting an Earp across the saloon, a deputy warning a drunk rider to lower his gun. None of these moments alone were enough to start a fight, but together they built a slow, unbearable pressure. Tombstone felt like a town sitting on a powder keg, waiting for someone to light the fuse. The Cowboys continued riding into town in large groups. Their red sashes flashed brightly in the sunlight. They laughed loudly, bragged about their raids, and fired guns into the air just to show they could. For them, Tombstone was a place to relax, drink whiskey, and remind everyone that the open desert answered to them, not the law. The Earps tried to keep peace, but every step fell heavier than the last. Virgil Earp, now Tombstone's town marshal, did his best to enforce the law fairly. He wanted to treat everyone the same, cowboy or not. But fairness was not something the Cowboys respected. They saw the Earps as men trying to steal control, and control was the one thing the Cowboys refused to lose. One night, the tension broke in a small but unforgettable way. It was late, close to midnight. The moon hung low, lighting up the dusty streets in a pale glow. The town was peaceful until the sound of gunfire shattered the quiet. Not just one shot, but several. Bang, bang, bang. The echoes bounced off buildings like angry thunder. Curly Bill Brocious, drunk as ever, stood in the street firing his pistol into the sky. People hid behind windows, afraid to step outside. Curly Bill shouted nonsense into the night, stumbling and laughing with wild eyes. Marshal Fred White, known as a decent, well-liked man, stepped forward to stop him. Fred did not want trouble. He wanted calm. He asked Curly Bill to hand over his weapon. The cowboy hesitated, swaying unsteadily. Then, whether by accident or by aggression, it happened. A gunshot exploded. Fred White fell to the ground. Blood pooled beneath him. The town froze. Wyatt Earp, who had been nearby, rushed to the scene. He grabbed Curly Bill, rustled him to the ground, and dragged him off to jail. Curly Bill shouted that it was an accident. Other cowboys gathered, growling threats and staring at the Earps with hatred burning in their eyes. Even though a judge later ruled the death accidental, the Cowboys never forgave Wyatt for arresting Curly Bill. To them, it was humiliation. And humiliation is something the outlaws never forget. From that moment, a line formed of Finn at first, but growing clearer every day. The Cowboys talked openly about driving the Earps out of Tombstone. Ike Clanton especially could not stay quiet. In saloons, he shouted that he would kill the Earps. He told anyone who would listen that the town belonged to the Cowboys, and anyone who challenged them would pay the price. The Earps kept their calm, but every threat made the divide deeper. Every loud night made the tension sharper. Every stranger in the street made the townspeople more nervous. Tombstone now had two centers of gravity. One was the Cowboys, loud, wild, and proud. The other was the Earps, calm, steady, and determined. Soon, the smallest match could start a raging fire. As months passed, the Cowboys grew bolder. They rode their horses fast through town, upsetting wagons and frightening children. They gathered in groups outside saloons, drinking heavily and starting fights. They whispered about revenge for Curly Bill. They joked about chasing the Earps out of Arizona, but the Earps stood firm. They walked the streets with quiet confidence. They spoke politely but carried the authority of law. They refused to be bullied. Then came the night that changed everything. In late October of 1881, Ike Clanton drank heavily. His anger grew with every sip. By midnight, he was storming through Tombstone, shouting that he would shoot every Earp he saw. He carried a rifle and a revolver. He challenged Doc Holliday. He threatened Virgil and Wyatt. The entire town heard him. Lawmen warned him to calm down. He refused. Friends tried to guide him home. He pushed them away. Every minute he grew more dangerous. By sunrise, Ike was still full of rage, still armed, still looking for a fight. The ERPs knew something had changed. This was no longer simple tension. This was the beginning of something deadly. The fuse had finally been lit. The whole town felt it like thunder rolling in the distance. Like the air before a storm, like the moment just before a gun is drawn. Tombstone was no longer waiting for trouble. Trouble had arrived, and soon everything would explode at a place called the OK Corral. Morning light reached the rooftops of Tombstone on October 26, 1881, but it did not bring peace. The town woke to a different kind of silence, sharp, tight, and full of fear. People whispered to each other as they stepped onto the streets. Everyone had heard Ike Clanton's drunken threats the night before. Everyone knew the Cowboys were angry, but no one knew what would happen now. The tension in the air felt like a rope pulled to its breaking point. Ike Clanton walked through Tombstone early that morning. He looked rough, tired, and furious. His head pounded from the long night of drinking. His clothes were dusty. His eyes were dark. But worst of all, he was still armed. He carried a rifle on his shoulder and a revolver at his hip. He shouted threats to anyone who dared to look his way. He said he would kill Doc Holliday. He said the Earps were finished. He said the Cowboys would show no mercy. People crossed the street to avoid him. Shopkeepers closed their doors. Mothers pulled their children inside. Marshal Virgil Earp heard the reports and knew this could not continue. A drunk, armed cowboy wandering the streets was dangerous. Virgil ordered Ike's weapons taken away. Wyatt and Morgan helped restrain him, and Ike was fined in court for carrying firearms inside city limits. But removing Ike's guns did not remove his anger. By noon, several cowboys had gathered near the Okie Corral. Tom McClory and Frank McClory, two brothers known for their skill and pride, were there. Billy Clanton, Ike's younger brother, joined them later. All three were armed and ready for trouble. Witnesses said they looked tense, their hands never far from their guns. The Cowboys claimed they were not seeking a fight. They said they were simply waiting for Ike. But their guns told a different story. Their cold eyes told a different story. Their presence told a different story. Tombstone felt like it was holding its breath. The IRPs gathered to discuss what should be done. Virgil, as town marshal, had the responsibility to confront the armed cowboys. Wyatt and Morgan stood by his side. Doc Holliday offered to join. Even though he was coughing badly that morning, he would not let his friends face danger alone. Virgil knew it was risky. He knew one wrong move could turn the street into a battlefield. But he also knew he could not turn away. If armed outlaws could walk freely through town, then law meant nothing. Around 3 p.m., Virgil made his decision. He strapped on his long coat. He checked his revolver. He looked at his brothers. Then he spoke simple, steady words. "Come on, boys. We're going to disarm them." The four men walked together. Virgil in front, Wyatt close behind, Morgan beside him, and Doc Holliday on the right, with a shotgun hidden beneath his coat. People stepped back as they passed. They watched from windows, from porches, from behind barrels and door frames. No one spoke. No one moved. Tombstone had never felt so quiet. When the Earps reached the narrow lot behind the OK Corral, they found the Cowboys standing together near a wooden fence. Frank McClory had one hand on his pistol. Billy Clanton's eyes were blazing. Tom McClory tried to speak, but his voice cracked with tension. Virgil raised his hand and called out clearly, "Throw up your hands. I want your guns." The request was simple. The meaning was not. Frank McClory responded angrily. He said he would not give up his gun unless the IRPs did the same. Billy Clanton shouted that he was not armed illegally. The scene grew tense fast. Everyone began talking at once. Voices rose, hands twitched toward holsters. Wyatt Earp later said the moment felt unreal, like the world slowed down. He saw the Cowboys' eyes, he saw their fear, he saw their pride, and he knew the next move would decide everything. Then it happened. No one knows who fired the first shot. Some said Billy Clanton. Some said Wyatt. Others swore it was Frank McClory. But the truth is this. Once the first gun fired, the world exploded. Gunfire tore through the small space. Smoke filled the air. Horses nearby panicked and pulled at their ropes. People inside nearby shops screamed and ducked behind walls. Doc Holliday fired his shotgun. Wyatt stood firm, shooting with deadly calm. Morgan moved quickly, trying to avoid bullets. Virgil shouted orders to stop fighting, but no one heard him over the thunder of guns. Billy Clanton was hit, but kept firing bravely. Frank McClory staggered, blood on his shirt, yet he lifted his gun again. Tom McClory tried to run or take cover, but the bullets found him too. The entire gunfight lasted less than 30 seconds. 30 seconds that would be remembered for centuries. 30 seconds that turned a small town into a legend. When the smoke drifted away and the echoes finally faded, 3 cowboys lay dead: Tom McClory, Frank McClory, Billy Clanton. Ike Clanton ran from the scene, terrified, leaving his brother behind. The ERPs stood battered but alive, breathing hard, covered in dust and sweat. The fight was over, but the war had only begun. Tombstone would never be the same. The streets of Tombstone were quiet after the gunfight at the OK Corral, but the silence did not bring peace. Instead, it felt heavy and cold, like a blanket of fear laid across the town. People whispered behind closed doors. Some believed the ERPs had done the right thing. Others feared the Cowboys' revenge. Everyone sensed one truth: the fight was not finished. The bodies of the fallen Cowboys were carried away, but their deaths lit a fire in the hearts of their friends and families. The McClory brothers had strong ties in the county. Billy Clanton was young and well-liked among his own. Their funerals were emotional, and angry voices filled the air. Many cowboys vowed that the ARPs would pay. Ike Clanton, the only cowboy who survived the gunfight, grew louder than ever. He stormed through Tombstone declaring that the ARPs were murderers. He claimed the Cowboys had been innocent. He swore he would take revenge. Ike had run from the fight, but now he acted fearless when surrounded by other cowboys. The IRPs remained calm on the outside, but inside, they knew danger had only just begun. Virgil Earp, the town marshal, tried to keep peace, even after the gunfight. He spoke to the sheriff, he met with town leaders, and he followed legal rules. But he also knew he had made powerful enemies. Wyatt Earp understood this too. He knew the Cowboys would not rest. Their pride was hurt. Their friends were dead. Their sense of control in the region was shaken. And a gang like that never forgives. They wait, they plan, they strike when no one expects it. For a few weeks, Tombstone returned to its usual noise: miners working, horses clattering through the streets, merchants shouting their prices. But underneath the surface, darkness moved quietly. Cowboys started riding into town in smaller groups, watching the ERPs from afar. They sat in saloons, whispering. They followed the brothers at night. They gathered outside town limits, studying the URP homes, waiting for the right moment. The storm finally arrived on a cold December night in 18A1. Virgil ERP, tired from long days of duty, walked alone across a dimly lit street near the Oriental Saloon. His boots crunched softly on the ground. The night was quiet, too quiet. Then, from the shadows, the silence broke. Gunshots, 4 of them. Bullets tore through the dark and hit Virgil. One struck his leg, another shattered his left arm. He fell to the ground as the gunman galloped away into the night, leaving nothing behind but drifting smoke. People ran out of buildings, shouting for help. Wyatt rushed to his brother's side, kneeling beside him with fear burning in his chest. Morgan and Doc arrived moments later, their faces tight with anger and disbelief. Virgil survived, but his arm was destroyed forever. He could never shoot with it again. His days as a lawman seemed over. The attack had been carefully planned and executed. The Cowboys' silent message that they were far from defeated. Wyatt felt the pain of that message more deeply than anyone. He stood by Virgil's bedside for hours, watching his strong, steady brother fight through agony. He listened as the doctor explained that Virgil would never use that arm again. He saw the sorrow in Virgil's eyes when he understood what the injury meant. The Cowboys had taken more than flesh and bone. They had taken a part of the Earp family's pride, but they were not finished. Tombstone tried to move on, but fear tightened around the town. Some blamed the ARPs for bringing violence. Others blamed the Cowboys for refusing to stop. Many simply stayed inside after dark, hoping not to get caught in the crossfire. The Earps stayed alert, walking the streets carefully and watching every shadow. Doc Holliday remained close, coughing but ready to fight at any moment. Wyatt became even quieter, his face harder, his eyes colder. He looked like a man waiting for something, or someone. That moment arrived in March of 1882. Morgan Earp, the youngest of the three brothers in town, relaxed one night inside Campbell and Hatch's billiard hall. He loved playing pool. It helped him clear his mind after long days. Wyatt stayed. Nearby, the night was peaceful. No arguments, no gunshots, no cowboys in sight. Then, without warning, a shot tore through the back window. Morgan's body jerked. The cue stick dropped from his hands. He collapsed to the floor as Wyatt ran to him. Another shot followed, then silence. Cowboys hiding outside slipped into the darkness before anyone could catch them. Wyatt knelt beside Morgan, holding him tight, calling his name. But Morgan's eyes were glassy. His breathing was slow. Blood spread across the wooden floor. He whispered just one thing before he died: "Don't let them get away." Wyatt felt something break inside him, something that could never be repaired. His youngest brother was gone, murdered in cold blood, taken without warning, without fairness, without honor. The Cowboys had won this round. The people of Tombstone watched as Morgan's body was carried out into the night, and they knew something terrifying was coming, because they had seen the look in Wyatt Earp's eyes look that promised action, the kind of action that changes everything. The night Morgan Earp died, Tombstone changed forever. The laughter in the saloons faded. Music stopped. People walked quickly and kept their heads low. A town that once buzzed with excitement now felt cold and hollow, as if the life had been drained from it. But the greatest change happened inside Wyatt Earp. For years he had lived by law. He believed justice came through courts, judges, and careful decisions. But now, holding the body of his youngest brother in his arms, that belief shattered like broken glass. Morgan had been shot in the back during a simple game of billiards. He never had a chance to fight. It was murder, simple, cruel. Murder. Wyatt stood beside the body, silent, his jaw tight, his eyes burning with a new and dangerous fire. Doc Holliday saw that look and understood immediately. Something inside Wyatt had woken up, something cold, something unstoppable. The next morning, the Earps escorted Virgil and Morgan's bodies out of Tombstone. Virgil, still injured from his own attack, traveled with his wife toward safety. Morgan's body was carried to the train station for the long journey back home. As the train whistle blew, Wyatt seemed to stand taller but heavier, as if carrying the weight of every shot fired against his family. Once his family was safe, Wyatt turned back toward Tombstone with Doc Holliday, Sherm McMaster, Turkey Creek, Johnson, and several trusted men. He gathered them in a small room and spoke softly, but with a voice sharp as steel. This ends now. We're not waiting for the law. We're not asking permission. He paused for a long moment. We ride. And just like that, Wyatt Earp changed from lawman to something far more feared, a hunter. The group he formed would be remembered as the URP Vendetta posse, but to the Cowboys, there was something far worse. A force coming for revenge, Wyatt's. First target was Frank Stillwell, a cowboy and known enemy of the ARPs. Stillwell had been seen near the train station the night Morgan was killed. Wyatt believed he had taken part in the attack. The posse tracked him down near Tucson. Stillwell ran when he saw the group approaching, but he didn't get far. Wyatt confronted him on the railroad tracks. The desert wind was the only sound as Stillwell begged for his life, but Wyatt didn't speak. He simply raised his shotgun and fired. The blast echoed across the empty land. For the first time, the Cowboys felt real fear. The ARPs moved fast after that. They rode through canyons, cliffs, and dry riverbeds, searching for every cowboy linked to the attacks. They slept little, ate when they could, and kept their weapons ready at all times. They no longer wore badges. They no longer asked questions. They only followed the trail of those who had tried to destroy their family. The most famous showdown came days later near a narrow creek called Iron Springs. Wyatt learned that Curly Bill Brocious, one of the most dangerous cowboys, was hiding there with a group of armed riders. Curly Bill had caused chaos across Arizona. He had shot lawmen, robbed travelers, and brought fear wherever he went. And many believed he had helped plan the attack on Virgil. Wyatt rode into the area without hesitation. As he approached the creek, cowboys on horseback recognized him and opened fire immediately. Bullets ripped through the air. The posse scattered for cover. Horses reared in panic, but Wyatt didn't stop. He kept riding straight toward Curly Bill. Curly Bill, laughing wildly, raised his shotgun and fired. Dust exploded around Wyatt's horse, but somehow Wyatt stayed seated. Witnesses later said it looked impossible, like the bullets simply refused to touch him. Wyatt lifted his own shotgun, aimed calmly, and fired both barrels. Curly Bill was thrown backward into the water. Dead before he hit the ground, the cowboys panicked. Some fled, some fought back desperately. Wyatt drew his revolver and fired again and again, hitting targets with deadly accuracy. Bullets tore through his coat, skimmed past his skin, but none struck him directly by the end of the fight. Curly Bill was gone, and several cowboys lay, wounded or dead. The posse regrouped, breathless and shocked. One man whispered what many later repeated, "Wyatt Earp, he walked through bullets like they were nothing." After Iron Springs, the Cowboys' strength began to crumble. Many of their leaders were dead or hiding. Others fled the territory entirely. Their once powerful network split apart like dry wood. The URP Vendetta ride continued for weeks. Crossing miles of harsh desert, the posse hunted men like Florentino Indian Charlie Cruz, who was later killed outside a hideout. They chased others into canyons and mountains until the cowboys were scattered. But the Vendetta ride came with consequences. The Earps were now wanted by the law for the killings. Even though many citizens believed the cowboys deserved their fate, Wyatt knew he could no longer stay in Arizona. The price on his head was too high. So, after breaking the cowboys' power, Wyatt and his men finally rode out of the territory. The war between the IRPs and the cowboys was over. The cowboys, once feared across the borderlands, were broken. Their empire collapsed. Their leaders were dead. Their red sashes faded into the dust. And Wyatt Earp became something larger than a lawman. A legend forged in fire, grief, and revenge. The desert was quiet after the Earp Vendetta ride. Too quiet. For years, the cowboys had ruled the borderlands with noise, guns, and red sashes. But now, their laughter was gone. Their raids had stopped. Their camps were empty. It felt as if a great beast had finally fallen, leaving behind only dust and memories. The death of Curly Bill Brocious was the first heavy blow. He had been the spirit of the Cowboys, the loud one, the wild one, the fearless one. When news spread that Wyatt Earp had shot him dead at Iron Springs, something cracked inside the gang. A man like Curly Bill was supposed to be unstoppable. If he could be taken down, then no cowboy was truly safe. Fear began to grow among them. Slowly at first, then quickly like a spreading fire. Some cowboys fled the territory. They rode far into Mexico or disappeared into rough mountains, hoping to escape Wyatt Earp's reach. Others tried to blend into towns, hiding their red sashes deep in saddlebags. A few even left the West completely, heading toward Texas or California. To start new, lives under new names. But the ones who stayed behind felt the walls closing in. The gang had once depended on strong leadersmen like Curly Bill, Johnny Ringo, and the McClory brothers. But now, most of those men were dead. Others were too afraid to take charge. Without leadership, the Cowboys were no longer a gang. They were scattered riders, lost and angry, unsure what to do next. Johnny Ringo, often called the most dangerous of them all, tried to keep some sense of order. But after Morgan Earp's death and the Vendetta ride, even Ringo seemed different. His cold confidence faded. His sharp eyes looked tired. He rode alone more often, drinking heavily and speaking to no one. People said he was haunted by guilt, by revenge, or by the ghosts of his fallen friends. The power the Cowboys once had was slipping through their fingers. Back in Tombstone, life was changing. The mining boom was slowing, and people were tired of violence. Families wanted peace. Businesses wanted stability. The town had suffered enough from gunfights and revenge. Slowly, Tombstone turned away from chaos and toward a quieter future. But the Cowboys could not escape their past. One by one, they faced consequences. Florentino Indian Charlie Cruz, believed to be one of the men involved in Morgan Earp's murder, was tracked down and killed during the Vendetta ride. Others were arrested for rustling or robbery. Some were shot when resisting capture. Every week brought new news: another cowboy gone, another name erased from the story, and then there was Ike Clanton. Ike had been at the center of almost every major conflict. He had ranted in saloons, threatened the ARPs, and encouraged violence. But when the shootings happened at the Oki Corral, at Morgan Earp's billiard table, he was always the one who slipped away. Some called him a coward. Others called him lucky. After the Vendetta ride, Ike left Tombstone and continued rustling cattle. He carried anger with him everywhere he went. He blamed the URPs for everything: the deaths of his brother Billy, his friends, the McClorys, and the fall of the Cowboys. Ike believed he still had something to prove. He wanted people to think he was strong, brave, and unbroken. But the world had changed. Without the Cowboys behind him, Ike was no longer a feared outlaw. He was simply a man making bad decisions in a land that no longer tolerated chaos. In 1887, while trying to steal cattle once again, he was confronted by a man named Jonas V. Brighton, a law officer. Ike tried to run. A shot rang out. Ike Clanton fell to the ground, ending a long trail of anger and mischances. With Ike's death, another link to the old cowboy empire was gone. By the late 1880s, the Cowboys were no longer a gang. They were stories told around campfires. Their red sashes, once a symbol of power, became symbols of a past that the West wanted to forget. Ranchers rebuilt their herds. Towns strengthened their laws. People began to walk the streets without fear. The Wild West was changing. The days of wild riders charging across the desert were fading. Railroads were growing. Governments were stronger. Towns had sheriffs who enforced real laws instead of looking the other way. The era of outlaws like the Cowboys was slipping into memory. Still, the legend of the Cowboys did not die completely. People continued to talk about their daring raids into Mexico. They spoke of Curly Bill's wild laughter, Johnny Ringo's deadly aim, and Ike Clanton's endless anger. They remembered the Okie Corral, the Vendetta ride, and the years when the Cowboys walked the border like kings. Some called them villains. Some called them victims of a harsh land. Some called them symbols of a world that would never return. But one thing was certain: the Cowboys, once powerful and untouchable, had fallen, lost to time, justice, and the unstoppable march of change. Their empire had turned to dust, blown away by the winds of the desert and the choices of men who could not escape their own legend. When the dust finally settled over Arizona, the Cowboys were gone. Their horses no longer thundered across the border. Their red sashes no longer flashed in the sunlight. The wild days of their power had ended, leaving behind a trail of broken lives old gunsmoke and stories that would never be forgotten. But the story of the Cowboys did not end with their deaths. It continued in whispers, in books, in saloons, and in the memories of those who had lived through their time. The West carried their legend like a scar, one that never fully healed, but reminded everyone of a time when law and chaos walked side by side. For years, the Cowboys ruled the borderlands. Their name carried weight, fear, and excitement. Some saw them as heroes of freedom who refused to bow to anyone. Others saw them as criminals, killers, and thieves. But no matter who told the tale, the Cowboys remained larger than life. They were a product of the frontier place, where rules were few and survival was everything. Many of the men who joined the Cowboys were not born outlaws. They were ranch hands, miners, drifters, and poor families looking for a chance. The West offered them nothing except open land, empty pockets, and danger. The Cowboys gave them belonging. They gave them purpose. They gave them a chance to be strong in a world that often made men feel weak. But that strength came with a price paid with blood. Over time, the Cowboys became symbols not only of rebellion, but of the darkness that comes when men live without limits. Their raids, their ambushes, and their drunken threats reshaped entire towns. People learned to look over their shoulders. Families moved away. Ranchers lived in constant fear. It was a world caught between opportunity and violence. The Cowboys' greatest enemy was not the IRPs. It was time. The West was changing fast. Railroads reached new towns. Judges and marshals became more common. Communities wanted safety, not chaos. The world that allowed the Cowboys to thrive was slowly disappearing. But before the Old West died, the Cowboys met the one family they could not outlast: the ARPs. The conflict between the Cowboys and the ARPs did not happen because of one event. It was a result of two beliefs crashing into each other. The Cowboys believed the desert belonged to anyone strong enough to take it. The Earps believed the desert could become a place of law and order. Both sides were shaped by their pasts. Both sides believed they were right, and the final outcome was written in gunfire. The gunfight at the Okie Corral became the turning point. It was the 30 seconds that defined an era. 3 Cowboys died that afternoon, and the balance of power in Tombstone shifted forever. Some called the ARPs heroes. Others said they acted too harshly, but no one denied that the OK Corral changed the West. The Cowboys' revenge was predictably and tragic. Virgil survived his ambush, but lost the use of his arm. Morgan was murdered in cold blood. These attacks unleashed the Vendetta ride, a storm of justice and fury led by Wyatt Earp himself. Wyatt's pursuit of the Cowboys finished what the Okie Corral had started. With every ride, with every confrontation, with every bullet fired, the Cowboys lost another piece of themselves until their gang was nothing more than a shadow. Soon, one by one, the remaining Cowboys fell to the law, to their own choices, or to the changing world. By the late 80s, the gang that once terrorized the borderlands had vanished. But legends never truly die. Over the years, storytellers began to reshape the cowboys' tale. Some painted them as tragic figures, outlaws born from hardship and desperation. Others showed them as villains who forced good men to rise against them. Some described them as misunderstood rebels who refused to kneel before anyone. In truth, the cowboys were all of these things. They were brave and reckless. They were loyal and ruthless. They were young men living in a time when danger was normal and death waited around every corner. Their red sashes became symbols of a lost world, a world that could never return. Even today, historians debate the cowboys' role in the West. Were they criminals, survivors, victims of a harsh land, or simply men trying to live by their own rules? The answer may be a mix of all these ideas, but one truth stands above all. The cowboys helped shape the Wild West's legend. Without them, there would be no OK Corral, no Vendetta ride, no story of Wyatt Earp that turned him into a frontier icon. The cowboys pushed the West to its breaking point, and in doing so, they helped define a turning point in American history where the wild frontier began its slow transformation into a more settled world. Their downfall marked the end of an era of open deserts, lawless nights, and men who lived by the gun. And so, the story of the Cowboys gang closes not with glory, but with reflection. They remain a part of the American spirit, bold, tragic, unforgettable, a reminder that history is never simple, and the men who shaped it were not simple either. In the end, their red sashes faded, but their legend never did.